Are we live? Is this on?
I think so. It looks like it's counting.
Counting is good, John. Counting is good. Good
Counting.
morning, everybody, to another Wake Up and Deliver episode 23. We're still going strong. Not skipping a beat, not missing a delivery. We're just getting it done.
Yeah. Nonstop.
Nonstop. John's consulting right now for the floral industry. He's in a floral warehouse. He's really helping them organize it. As you can tell, it's partly greenhouse, partly not temperature controlled. So he's trying to figure out how he can help them better.
Well, this is the staging. This is the staging area. So it's like fast-moving consumer goods. You got to be careful. You can't. Where's the red ones? It's over there somewhere. Yeah. You got to be careful with them.
They're moving so quickly you can't even see the people in the background. They're like zero right past them.
Yeah. Well, they are called flash logistics. So actually, I shouldn't say that. That might actually be somebody. That is not an endorsement for anybody.
That is not a plug for anybody.
Yeah, I am sure that there's somebody with that name.
Yeah, positively there is. All right, let's get started. As always, we're going to get some coffee in us in the form of knowledge. I have scraped the entire internet for quotes to see John's reactions, and I think he's going to be glowing with anticipation for this one after his wonderful day in the sun yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, we'll talk about that after. Okay, go.
Every choice is a brush stroke. No single stroke creates a masterpiece, but eventually the portrait emerges.
I don't know. Here, my response, if I can get it to show properly. I don't know. The camera's being silly.
Yes, please.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to help that along. Yes, please.
There you go. Yeah. When you're playing with these virtual backgrounds, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I honestly think that too many people, and look, just everyone knows Matt, Matt and I talk all the time, and I bitch all the time to Matt about different things. And one of my most frustrating things is that, frustrating things is the fact that people, no, and this isn't just like a recent thing. It's like corporate life, everything. Like working on the basics becomes like a real challenge. Really taking the time to do all of the steps becomes a challenge. Everybody wants, to your point here, this final portrait, but everyone's like, well, yeah, but I don't want to do the 2,000 brush strokes or whatever it might take, like, to get it done. It's like, yeah, but that's not how it works, man.
Not everything, as I call it, not everything is instant oatmeal. Sometimes the good old oatmeal takes a little bit longer, and is better for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. So Matt made a comment about my redness. Like, we imagine this. Like,
I said the sun. I didn't say anything about the redness.
Well,
but now that you mention it,
I'm bringing it out. I'm bringing it out for everybody. So just because he's like, we're on backstage. He's like, oh, what's going on with your setup and stuff? You look really red. And then I'm like trying to fiddle with things. And I'm like, also, but there's like a portion of that that's probably legit. I'm like, I went golfing yesterday for the first time in like 8 years, and was out there for like 4 hours. So I am probably red. So he's like, oh, like, yeah, okay. I'm not 100% sure if it's not the camera. Clearly, I'm moving around today, so it could be a combination of things. But there is some legitness to the redness, and I'm not just stressed out, and I'm not just going to implode or whatever.
Yeah, and part of your jawline keeps disappearing too. It's kind of
yeah. I'm telling you, the StreamYard virtual background, a little weak. Because I mean, like, I'm sitting in front of Windows. I've got my extra light on. I'm using a better camera than my laptop camera. So overall, StreamYard, if you're watching, this could be improved for sure, because Google and Microsoft have it locked down pretty good. Ooh, we got Drew in the audience today. Drew, haven't seen you in a while. How are things?
Drew and Amrit saying good morning, happy Monday to everybody. Thanks for joining us. As always, let's get a little bit warmed up and started. What do I want to talk about? Last week I joined I do one of my favorite conferences that I do. It's the CITT yearly conference. And the CITT, for those who don't know, is the Canadian Institute of Traffic and Transportation. They give out educational certification, which is I am part of, which is the CCLP. That is a plug and an endorsement. If you're into logistics and you want to learn, you want to get into the field, definitely worthwhile checking out, especially in the Canadian side. There's an American equivalent. Go ahead, John.
I was gonna say, just for people too, like they don't mess around. Like, like a lot of these certifications are kind of like, let's be real, they're kind of easy to get. It's a little bit pay for play. The CITT stuff, like they fail you. Like
Yep.
I've had people on my teams in the past go through it, and I've been fortunate to be part of organizations that then also supported the the program and the fees and all of these things. And it's legit. Like the courses to go through people. Like I remember, having them come and show me the types of exercises they had to do, the expectations and stuff like that. Definitely don't mess around. So a better plug for the fact that it's quality. Like it really will force you to
learn.
dive in.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of micro ones. You don't have to do the whole course. There's micro ones for specific employers that don't want you to take the whole course. There's a few classes that you can take to help get you the basics of understanding of logistics, and it's fantastic because it does help people who aren't from the logistics world enter the logistics world, and it's a great way to learn. Anyways, on to the conference. Great conference as always. It's a 2-day packed all-day conference. A lot of great networking, a lot of great people to meet out there. A lot of industry friends that I always enjoy having a chat with, seeing what's going on in the industry. And then there's a lot of like lessons learned, things that are going on that you don't realize that are happening from different perspectives. So it's definitely worth checking out. I did mention to John when I was there, I'm like, why aren't you here? There's so many things you could have learned and met with people. And he's like, next year. So we're going to see if we can. Maybe we'll do it next year. Maybe we'll do it live next year.
Matt forgets to mention he texts me while he was at the conference. Why aren't you here? So in all fairness, it's not like I was like, well, 2 weeks before. I'm like, nah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the topics are great because it's not usually, because I know John and I talk a lot, like 85% last mile and trucking, and the topics there range from cybersecurity for your business, to environmental things that you could do better, to even tires. There was a great segment from Cal Tire on how the process of recycling tires and that whole engagement happens, which I was nowhere of, and it's just good lessons learned to learn. Where they talk about the single-use tires that are very popular right now amongst truckers, and how much more they're damaging the environment than a little bit more expensive tires that you can retread and reuse, which I found very which I didn't know either.
That's interesting because like in both my previous roles where I had fleet responsibility, it was retread 100% of the time, or like, and if it couldn't be a retread, it was obviously new but retreadable. Like, you know what I mean? There was definitely none of this nonsense around like disposable tires.
Well, I mean, you did work for organizations that have had billions of dollars at their disposal, and safety. They didn't want to see one of their trucks with thousands of dollars spilled all over the highway. So I can see them being very focused on that. But another great topic that we were having, which is happening in the industry across Canada and the United States, is driver ink and safety amongst drivers. One of the great things that was, even brought up, which I saw on one of the LinkedIn posts last week, was during Blitz week, everybody was talking about how there was a crunch for capacity. And there was a lot of great comments going around going, well, there is no crunch. Everybody's just using unsafe carriers. Because if you're using safe carriers that can pass Blitz week, they should be on the road, and there should be no capacity crunches whatsoever.
Well, so I agree with that, like at the most fundamental level, like I really do. But on the flip side, just so that it doesn't make people feel that we're saying like every trucker, there's so many bad truckers out there and stuff like that. I do think that for a lot of smaller businesses, especially like smaller trucking firms, talk it 3 to 10 trucks or something like that. If you know that there's going to be so much more attention, and even if you feel decently good with your team, there's always the possibility of things going wrong. And the impact of those infractions on your CVOR, they sit there, they're very hard to get away from. Like they can definitely have an impact for like an honest mistake as well. That said, I don't disagree with you that there's an interesting correlation to the fact that safety up, people off the road, but I just don't want to paint everybody with that same massive stroke.
And to that point, a great comment back to our earlier. I like that. Even to that point, John, it's great to notice that even smaller trucking companies, if they do have an out of service, even a small one, it does affect them far greater than someone like I don't know, one of the bigger, like Schneider getting one infraction because they have so many more trucks. So that balance is very unfair, and they should look at it a little bit differently. But the point still stands. Safety should be number one. You're driving on the highway with a 40,000 pounds behind you. You're basically a missile heading down, and we're seeing too many distracted drivers all across Canada, United States, causing accidents. And that's one thing that we need to, and which I was going to just lead into. Recently, there's been a blitz in Ontario and BC on distracted drivers and on what's it called, Driver Inc. Go ahead, you're going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, so the interesting thing is that you get a lot of flack on the driver side, and of course things like Driver Inc., the way that the driver's driving, this is a huge safety element as well. If you want to find out another big area of like WTF safety thinking, there's a lot of warehouses, especially as you see these warehouses pop up these days. Okay. Yeah. That then, especially, and this is where I would have a
or garages.
Oh yeah, you can get into that after Popeye, but like, there's a lot of, here's something that I would say is something very concerning. If you're a small to medium sized business, and you're maybe been doing a lot of e-com or whatever, and you're starting to move into B2B, whether that's wholesale activity, whether that's filling retail stores, whatever it is shocking how many people do not understand how to load a trailer or a truck. And be very mindful of any small provider that's just like, oh, we were doing e-com and now we're just going to do B2B. It's like, I'm not saying they can't, but in e-com, you never almost have to worry about how to load a truck. Like, they don't even think about it. But when you're starting to do B2B deliveries, you're going to be handing off that trailer to a driver. It most certainly matters how the weight is distributed, where those pallets are positioned. Are they blocked at the front? How are they protected at the rear and stuff like that? So of course there's the driver element, but warehouses these days too is pretty shocking as people are trying to scramble and expand out their business space.
That is a fantastic point. Even how a pallet is built sometimes, how it's top heavy, bottom light, and it can crumble, it can break, and then becomes a claim issue and it increases claims. All those factors do start at different stages of the supply chain, and you got to be mindful of that. And even warehouses, speaking of pop-up warehouses, I did a very impromptu post on Friday because when I saw this, it was unbelievable to me that a big organization like Popeyes didn't vet the warehouses they were using, and people were using just garages that weren't temperature controlled to store chicken with expired and defective chicken.
This blows my mind because outside of fish, chicken is the next thing that is really quick to be like, oh, something's not right. So It's shocking to me that some of this stuff sounds like it got into the supply chain.
And maybe from your perspective, John, how do you think that happened? How do you think a procurement person, and this is, I guess, the problem with large RFQs, where you just see a number and you don't vet the process. Even visiting, that's why I find it very valuable. Any carrier I use, I try to go visit them at least once, or at least I try to go check them out, their facility, see what their office looks like, see what they are like in person versus just being on the phone. And that's just part of my due diligence. I might not get to everybody, but that's part of the process. Same as the warehousing that I use. I like to go visit them. I get pictures. I ask for it quite often because I want to make sure that they're clean, they're orderly. There's not anything that is unsafe. That the racks, I often see very often too, is racks without bumper guards, and people are just smashing into the racking all the time, which then breaks the integrity of the racking, and if it can damage your product that's sitting there. So that's why it's very important to look out for these little nuances. But anyways, going back to my question, how does procurement get there? Like, how did they not realize that this is a problem?
If I had to, so giving the most benefit of the doubt to Popeyes, okay, I would say that the most likely way I could see it happening would be that the carrier was initially vetted and everything was fine, and the process was initially vetted. And after some period of time, either that carrier chose to expand, wanted to expand, made them an offer to expand, and because they felt comfortable with the carrier, they just agreed. And that carrier started doing things in a way to, like, here's the thing. I've seen definitely in my experience, like, people do the right things. They take on that next part of the contract. They take on that next phase of expansion. It
Yeah.
doesn't go the way they think, or they try like, 3 or 4 things together, and it kind of tumbled, but they had already made commitments to 1 or 2 customers, but they needed 4, let's say, to make it work, and it didn't, and it's not happening. Then they're trying to not go back on their word. They're still trying to hustle. So they're trying to do something in between to survive and to make it work, and to get to where they wanted to be. So I think that there can still be the right intentions at one point. Clearly, this went down a really bad decision path and decision tree, but I don't think it was completely a failure from the start. If I had to give sort of like the most likely way I could see it happening. Now, the flip side would be just pure negligence and due diligence, and someone managing a report and getting a big benefit for taking a really low cost carrier, and everyone just kind of looking the other way. But I'm just not sure at that level, especially with RBI being the size they are, that I don't know if I would bet on that versus my first offer.
Well, that brings me, I guess, to my topic not my topic, one that comes to mind, and I'm lost for words today. I don't know. I haven't had enough of that morning coffee, or too many words in my mind. Is I don't think logistics personnel should be incentivized to lower their logistics spend, because that incentivized meaning if you get a big bonus if you can get the pricing down, because that drives the wrong metric in the wrong direction. Right? Because then you're seeing logistics as a waste that needs to be brought to zero as quick as possible.
Yeah. Okay. So that I agree. So that's interesting. So I mean, it's funny. So a huge part of my career was actually being the one responsible for.
That's why I directed it at you.
Yeah, but it's just for everyone watching. Like I was responsible for national continuous improvement programs, national network optimization programs, and if we just peel back the curtain on those very safe words, very often that meant cost reductions, right? Like that's for the most part what people generally mean.
Yep.
So I agree and disagree. I do think, and I agree with you 100%. The number of times I've had to go to bat and say like, no, like that can't happen or whatever, it's not realistic, is more than probably people think. There's a ton of pressure there. So I do think it's extremely important that the leaders and the people that you have in place that are responsible for these decisions have a backbone, and then have support, right? Like, as they move up the chain. That said though, like their logistics, especially supply chain in general, but logistics more so than purchasing, that's a little bit more, let's call it just math oriented, a little bit faster to see. Logistics is very easy to start bleeding from a number of small decisions that in themselves are all right, but as you keep stacking them, there's a lot of like leakage, there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of bad fits that definitely require you to come back around and readjust.
And when I mean that it shouldn't be driven by that pure metric of budgetary pressure of just decreasing the price, it should be based off of, and this is part of the challenge that I think is in our space, is there's not much of knowledge of what is the market rate and what is the true market rate for something to move. And so that being, if you have, you're running from Chicago to Toronto and you have a great carrier, one carrier might be $1,800 to run that lane, the other carrier might be $1,200 for that lane. And without having an understanding of why one is higher, one is lower, the system automatically just says the average is, what I said, 12.18, 15.50? Is that right?
Yeah.
15.50 is the average market rate. So you shouldn't always go for that 1,200 guy, but you should find carriers that are in that 15 range, not the highest, not the lowest, or maybe figure out why the lowest is the lowest, because he might have a great outbound, and understanding that function of why can you do it and can you sustain that run. And that doesn't just necessarily go for trucking. This can apply for warehousing as well, right? There might be a position of space that the warehouse already has 80% of his warehouse already filled. It's covering its costs, and it can give you a preferred rate.
Or the other, or 20% is filled with gold, and they're making so much money that everything else can be cheap.
Exactly, and they can do it a lot cheaper because it just fits within their warehouse. Same as last mile delivery. Like you might have a carrier that's already going to those same spots, and it can give you a very preferred rate because he has that function. But you have to understand the full metric, and that isn't become the pure market rate, as in what you see on the DAT, what you see on the load link, what you see on these trends, because they're just taking the averages of what information they're being fed. And that's not always necessarily
Oh,
the actual true rate, because every carrier has a different rate. They start from a different location, so their dead haul miles are different. The warehouse might have a different cost per square foot from the next one. There's so many different factors that are in place to figure out the
or
rate.
at the end of the day, they're just taking it as a loss because they're hoping to start getting some traction.
Some freight. I think John froze. And they're just taking, like John was saying, taking some rates to get the traction going because they have to fill that lane. And sometimes it's not about just moving the needle. You do really need to figure out which carriers fit your network, not just based off of the market. Oh, you're back?
Oh, yeah, Wi-Fi flickered. Sorry. So I agree. Finding out exactly why someone is at that rate or something is super important, right? For when you're doing it and making your decisions. That said, it's an interesting segue because I do think that there's some times then, to your point, where there starts to become some real fundamental differences. So right now, look, everybody on this platform loves to rag on UPS and FedEx, and there's whole people on here making their money just negotiating these contracts. So they love to poke them. But when you have DHL, Canada Post, USPS, all of UPS, FedEx, who are basically saying $3 a package, $2 a package deliveries don't work. And then you've got all of these regionals and you've got all these small players that try to pretend that they have some smoking app that's allowing that to be realistic. Like there's a real divergence there.
Yeah.
And people need to really start understanding that, like, to your point, when you really understand the cost of the delivery, there's no app and there's no optimization that is going to make someone 25% of the cost and still be profitable or sustainable. Like, it's just not going to happen. There's not that much margin in the majority of logistics activity out there.
And unfortunately, for most of the part, it's vendor VC money that's fueling it to get market share. So they're doing it at a loss and hoping on other pieces coming in later. It's the whole Uber effect that we talked about a few weeks ago, where Uber used to be like, $5-7 to get somewhere. I can't remember last time an Uber was $5 to get anywhere.
Exactly.
And when they brought in dynamic pricing, you're like, whoa, why is it all of a sudden $80 for the same run? And then all of a sudden it became different because they got that market share, which they needed to penetrate into. This is very same on this last mile aspect that John's talking about, is you don't the cost is the cost. You can't really get below that to pay somebody, and that cost is associated. You can't get below the $2 to make that delivery. Eventually that price is going to go up. Yeah. And this is it's a short-term fix, and then you won't be able to sustain that if you have a long-term plan against that pricing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's something that I would caution for anyone out there. Like, you have to remember that at the end of the day, if you're a small to medium business, retail, food service, anything that you're doing, you're the one that's going to be stuck with the customer problems. You're the one that's making the promise to the customer. So, like, a lot of these providers that are just saying whatever they can do, low cost warehousing, low cost bulk transport, low cost last mile, doesn't matter. They're basically saying whatever they need to make you say yes, but you're going to be the one left holding the bag with your customers, or dealing with all of the frictions and stuff like that. And, quite frankly, a lot of them get to the point where they hope that for the value they're charging, you'll deal with a lot of nonsense.
Think about it this way. Imagine how frustrated you get when Amazon goes away from the 24-hour shipping because of a surge. And you're like, oh, I don't want to wait a week anymore for the Amazon package because they made that promise to you. And how many of us don't go back to your Prime subscription and get that money back, because you are entitled to a refund for the most part, that you don't. It's because you get frustrated, you start using Amazon less, you look for other choices for your product, and you just move away. And it's a market share loss for them. But that's the same thing for your product. Like, imagine if you promised your customer something and you can't deliver anymore, they're going to look somewhere else for the same product.
Yeah. And, and it's funny, like there's just so many weird things going on. Like I started a different project last week, and it was funny looking at the invoices. I always love looking at invoices because like you see things that are happening, and it's funny to be like, oh, transportation all rolled into one number. Oh, this one has fuel surcharge. Oh, this one doesn't have this. Oh, this one has that. It's so interesting to see, like from someone that doesn't maybe look at those all of the time. It's like I looked at that and I'm like, oh, this is immediately like sending off alarm bells, right? Like imagine if you got an invoice from a multi-leg thing that you're doing or whatever, and it's just one number, one unit, one number, nothing broken down, no FSC in there, nothing. You're like, yeah, something's not right.
But often people ask for that. They're like, I don't like. I've had customers even be like, roll in the tax as well. Like, I don't want to see that. I just want to see. Yeah, I'm like, I want to see just one number when you're quoting me. I want to know what I'm paying in the end. And sometimes you're like,
yeah,
okay.
I can see it. I can see it as a quote or like something you want to say to someone. Hey, it's going to be $5,000 all in. Like that's your dead net. I mean, taxes. People shouldn't think about it that way because it doesn't have the same impact. But if they are or whatever. I mean, it has a cash flow thing, the short term. So if they want to look at it and say $5,000, okay. But at the end of the day, I would never take an invoice that way because you just never know what's going on. And what most people don't realize is that as you have sort of continuing activity or whatever, you want to be able to track these different things so that, when your cost per X changes, you can understand, like, was it a base cost change? Was it a fuel related change? Was it a manual, like lumper type charge, whatever? Like you need to know these things because that is where you start bleeding profit that you don't even realize is happening.
I'm gonna have it's gonna be more than 3 minutes because I'm gonna get John fired up here. I think.
Oh my god!
How many owners, product people, logistics along the whole supply chain actually do you think look at the invoices?
Oh, not enough. They do the negotiating at the start and stuff, and then they just hope that it always falls in. I mean, the sheer number of businesses that are in parcel auditing proves like how many people don't look at the invoices after the fact. And I mean, I think even on the transportation side, you're seeing that the need for, Parabola as an example got all kinds of, fanfare when they first introduced the PDF processing, the AI PDF processing, because now you can do your freight invoices and send it through, which by the way, that's going to be quite an expensive process if you use their credit system, but whatever. It just shows how few people do it. When I was in the food industry, I had my regular tractor trailer deliveries, especially that were let's call it more component paid. Say it that way, just so people get it. I had a whole template that every week I would put it in, and I would have all of the drops / stops for all of the retail stores and whatever. And I would know immediately, like, did my base cost change? Was it because of fuel change? Was it because there were extra charges that went onto that invoice that were unplanned, which happens. Don't get me wrong, that happens. And I would know immediately, week to week, about what was going on. But I would check them every week when they came in. And a lot of people don't do that, but that's where you go from good to great, guys. Just as an FYI.
That's why John is great at what he does. He is very, very attention detailed.
I'm probably too operationally detailed, but yeah,
operationally innovative and and very focused on that. That's why he needs to attend these CITT conferences to help our viewership
good point.
expand on that. But no, on all jokes aside, we're coming out on time, and as always, we want to be mindful. We don't want any waiting charges applied to us this week. John, any final thoughts? What should we focus on for the week, as you do usually give us a good tidbit?
I don't think that there's a ton there. Okay, honestly, funniest thing that when I was doing research for the newsletter was talking about the impact of all of these tariffs and what they've caused for already manufacturing disruptions in China. And I thought there was a little bit of irony when the fact that they used the 4th of July celebrations for a bunch of stuff that they didn't produce at the same level as they had in the years previous. But just really appreciate the fact that even if, tariffs settle down, even if other things are kind of like balancing out over the next, couple of weeks or whatever, there's been a lot of manufacturing loss, like in terms of time. And nobody has invented time, and you're not going to invent more capacity. Like, so the capacity is what's in the system. So be mindful for anything that you might run on special runs, contract logistics, like different types of things, and go back and validate and understand if you now maybe have some extended lead times and stuff, like as we start rolling through the summer, because everyone kind of usually chills out and takes their enjoys summer, enjoys their vacation, and then all of a sudden, sort of Q4, the September through the end of the year, and everyone's like stressed out again. So start thinking about that and start checking on some of those lead times now and maybe what has changed.
Not only that, I don't know if people saw the news, but ocean freight's up 80% in rates.
Well, yeah, everyone's charging more for the containers
because there's the bottleneck,
Yeah.
So you gotta be mindful. You gotta book those loads in now, secure that rate, because it will go up as capacity gets tighter and tighter. On that note, as always, thanks for everybody for joining us. We'll be here next week. Same dock, same warehouse, same loading time, same delivery. Cheers.